Hello, and thank you so much for joining us for this week's edition or episode of Digital Dilemmas. This week's topic is something that I'm super interested in. It has personal relevance for me, and I think for probably a lot of our listeners. We're going to be talking about 23&Me and the dissolution of the company and what's going to happen to all of the data.
Digital Dilemmas is a Lenk Media original podcast.
If you're like me, I have done 23&Me. Many people I know have done it. And if you have done it, you know that the amount of data that they provide you with is, it's almost overwhelming. It's an enormous amount of data. Personal data that relates to your health. And I guess my question for you, John, is if this company is going under, what happens to everybody's data?
Well, I think it's a good topic, and it wasn't on the calendar to talk about, but I think this is a really good example, before I answer your question, Amber, of the world we live in and why this podcast exists. We're on vacation last week in Florida. We're enjoying visiting our relatives and our friends, sunshine, warm weather, and I read an article. To your point, 23&Me declares bankruptcy. Okay, what does that mean? Well, you laid it out. Many of us have, I've tried it. You've tried it. We probably have a lot of friends and relatives that are on either Ancestry.com, which focuses on your family tree a little bit more. 23&Me focuses on your medical and your health. So it's affecting all of us, comes out of the blue. A company like this declares bankruptcy. Well, what does that mean? Well, why do I care? Why do I care if 23&Me goes bankrupt? Well, here's why. The assets of a company like 23&Me, the assets are going to be sold. They're going to go on the auction block. And what are the primary assets of 23&Me is our genetic data. So some might say or think, well, it's medical data. It's covered by HIPAA rules. It's not. This is consumer data that we signed off on when all of us spit into that tube and sent our genetic information to 23&Me. And that DNA is the asset that will be sold and is extremely valuable. So before we even get into it, the risk is your genetic data is on the auction block. Start there. What are your fantasies of worrying, like what's going to happen?
Me? Well, I'll tell you. My fantasies are what happens when a company buys this and sells it to health insurance companies. And I can no longer get coverage because I have a pre-existing condition that they have found in the layers of data of 23&Me. That's one example.
Bingo, you nailed it. So let me go over the top what I think three concerns are. One is what you just said. 23&Me has all this genetic data on millions of people. The insurance companies would love to get their hands on it for the exact reason you just shared. So now an insurance company can deny coverage to individuals based upon, well, we just found out, Burr, that you have a genetic predisposition towards blah, blah, blah. And I don't think it'd be a really smart idea for our insurance company to cover you anymore. That's a huge risk. Insurance companies gaining hold of your genetic data. Number two, pharmaceutical companies are going to buy this data. Now, you might say, well, that's not a risk if the pharmaceutical company has the data. But here is what you're missing out on, I think. They're going to use our or mine. I'll use me as an example. They're going to use my data without my consent to develop new drugs, and I'm not going to get a penny. Whereas prior, they would have paid for that. So they're going to pay
Well,
in
they're
one
going to
chunk.
pay for it. They're
They're going
just
to.
not
I'm
going to
not going
pay
to see
us.
it. Right. Number three, data brokers who broker for bad actors are going to have access to your genetic data. And once they have this data, let's say a bad actor has it because they bid the highest bid at the auction block, they can do anything they want with it. So what could they do with it? Well, we'll get into that later. I don't want to. That's a road I don't want to go down. Let's before we go down that road, I want to go down the road that says, well, I never did it. I never did DNA testing. I never did 23&Me. I never did Ancestry.com. So I really don't need to worry. Yeah, you do. Here's why. If anybody in our family trees did it, they have 99% of our DNA. So let's just say I didn't do it, but my daughter did. They have my DNA. So if anybody in your family tree did it, you're still not safe.
That's fascinating. So it's not even a question of whether or not you've used 23andMe. It's pretty much, I mean, I wonder what the numbers are. I wonder how many people um, in America that covers,
I
whether,
think pretty much everybody.
well, yeah, but that's soft data. That's not, I would
Yeah.
love to know how many people, how many people have used 23andMe, which should be an easy number to get. And then I'd love to know how many people, say one immediate family member. How many people have an immediate family member who's used 23andMe? Um,
Without using a technical term, a lot,
yeah, yeah.
right? So if we go down just a little bit of that road, I'll give you an example, and I checked on it earlier today. Law enforcement and corporations are using shared genetic markers between family members to catch criminals and to do other things, like you mentioned regarding coverage. So there was a case out in California, it's referred to as the Golden State Killer, was caught through DNA from a distant relative who used one of these services.
Oh, so it's not even just like um,
Doesn't that right? Because if you,
an
one of the
immediate
things we
relative.
learned, like I did, you have the same example. I used 23andMe and I found relatives all over the world, right? And then when you look it up and you dive into the website, the genetic markers that I share with people I'll never meet who live in the Middle East and in Finland and in all over the United States and Canada, we share so many of the same genetic markers that mark us as relatives. They basically have my DNA. If I had a distant relative in California who I never met, just by looking at their DNA, they can find me. So they have caught criminals this way. It's called genetic matching databases. Kind of like the old days of fingerprints. But now it's even more sophisticated because it's DNA based. So what it
So
means,
I just did some quick research. 15 million people. Uh, 23andMe has 15 million customers. And when you sign up, I guess 80% of the customers opt to have their genetic data analyzed for medical research.
wow,
It's a lot of people.
that's a lot of people. So again, we've got, just to review it, insurance companies can prevent coverage. Um, I'm reading here, I'm looking up live. They can charge you higher premiums.
Right.
Um, let's look at the nefarious one, digital surveillance and profiling. So this is the one I think, especially with what's going on now, it's relevant. Governments
So
will
we
be able
have,
to.
just to back, I just want to slow it down a little
No,
because
go ahead.
your mind's moving a little quickly. So we have sort of the two, I don't want to say legitimate, but legitimate issues. Uh, people, we have health insurance companies and we have pharmaceutical companies, both of which have a vested interest in this data.
Correct.
Um, and now you're talking about a third party or third
Correct.
parties.
Correct.
I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. Third party is government or bad actors. Sometimes the same thing. So the government can track people. Authoritarian regimes could use DNA to identify political dissidents. It's just another piece of data. So if they have your social media data, they have any other data that's out there. We all know that all our data is being tracked. Now you combine it with genetic data.
Well, and it could be used to target advertising. It could be used to
I
segment the
guess.
population.
I guess you're right. It could be something as innocent as targeted advertising because they know that I might have a predisposition toward a certain
Say they know
genetic
you're predisposed
disease
to
as I
type 2
age, and I
diabetes
would get ads on social media channels.
or heart disease or breast
Yeah, you
cancer
could. That's right.
or
Because if they combine, especially with artificial intelligence capabilities, if we combine AI, data analysis, genetic markers, social media profiles, boom, they've got a full dossier of who John Murphy is, and I could get targeted ads. That would be the nicest use of a bad situation.
right.
I think we can all agree that the fact, and we kind of knew this when we did it. I talked about this in the classroom. I've talked about this with others that companies would or governments would love to have everybody's DNA, and nobody would voluntarily give it away. But when these companies like 23&Me or Ancestry.com came along, the pitch was to show us relatives that we didn't know we had,
And
or
to show us health
to help
conditions
us
that we
take
didn't know
care
we
of our
had.
health better as we age because we would find out things about ourselves. That was the pitch. And so we gave away our DNA for the price of $100 or whatever it was. But now our DNA is out there and it can be sold.
It's going to be
So I
interesting.
so I think what our audience would like to know that I think we want to share is okay, we can agree that we have an interesting situation. Um, Stuff like this could happen again and again. What can we do about it? So, a couple things that I verified this morning. If we are, or anyone is interested in still doing DNA testing going forward, there are companies that prioritize privacy. One is called Nebula Genomics, and one is called Genobanks. They offer anonymous and encrypted DNA testing. So if we're still in, so there are companies coming along now saying, hey, we see the ethical situation here, so our company is going to be more ethical. I'm not saying they're going to be perfect. They could go under, who knows? But there are companies out there, one is called Nebula, one is called Genobanks, that uses anonymous and encrypted DNA testing. And you're allowed to go out there and delete the data anytime you want. Second thing, if any of us have already used 23andMe or Ancestry, we can go out there right now while they're going through bankruptcy proceedings and request our data be deleted. You can download your raw DNA test, and then we can submit a request for permanent deletion of our genetic profile, and we can click on a box that says opt out of third-party sharing. So there are things that we can do if we go out to 23andMe now and walk through the process of deleting our DNA data. And they have to keep their website up and running while these bankruptcy proceedings go forward. So it's going to be several months. And I'm going to go out there and I'm going to give it a go. Because I think I owe it to everybody to see. I'm going to go delete my data and let's see how easy it is.
Right.
Now, I know we have people out there who are techies, like we're in the business like myself, and the cynical part of me is like, what does delete really mean?
Yeah.
I mean, they've backed this up on a
The
million
internet
servers.
is forever.
Right. I mean, what does delete really mean, right? Like if you would
Right.
deleted your Facebook page today, is it really deleted? Well, it's deleted that you can't see it anymore, but is it really deleted?
Right.
I get it. But I'm going to try and go out to 23andMe, opt out, delete my data, request permanent deletion, and check the box that says I'm opting out of any third-party sharing. See what happens. I think what's important to know is it's just another lesson in this whole data privacy issue that we started talking about when we started this podcast a year and a little bit ago. I went out there and checked when I was putting this idea together to talk about today. There is no regulation at all. Nothing. There's no laws on this. And I know we're going to talk about in the coming weeks when we talk about more AI stuff. I just don't understand how difficult it can be to just put some simple guidelines, laws, and regulatory agencies out there to help protect citizens. And and get this, just to leave the audience as we start to wrap up on this topic. As usual in Europe, not a problem. You can go out there and delete your data, genetic data, anytime you want. And if they don't get rid of it and delete off any subsequent backup servers, they get fined tons of money.
I would like to
Again,
say it's frustrating that you can't have the data just for yourself. Like, why do you have to delete the data to prevent anybody from getting their hands on it? Why can't I have the data for my own personal knowledge? And
I need to confirm this, but I believe in Europe you can. This is what's frustrating the more I get into this, is that
it can be done.
it can be done, and other continents or countries, they value a human's data, whether it's on social media, a website, or genetic data. They value it as a human right, whereas in the United States, we do not.
Right.
And that's really sad. Really, really, it's just, another log on the pile of why can't we do this? Like you say, why can't I find out what I'm predisposed to get based on my genetic DNA, so that I can do what I need to do to live as best a life as I can and work with my physicians? Why do I have to worry about deleting it and it being sold, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Anyway,
it's fascinating to me that what's fascinating to me is that it sort of exists on the borderline of consumer data and health data.
Well, you know what? I think this falls into the category of of what we, especially in America right now, when it comes to technology, and I'm writing about this on my Substack, show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome. And right now, everything on social media, everything on digital media, everything in genetic data, the incentive is money. If the incentive is money, like you say, that's what you're driving at, then the outcome is going to be, well, we're just trying to make as much money as we can, as fast as we can. The laws aren't going to be able to keep up, and we're all, not we, the billionaires are going to make a ton of money because that's the incentive. If the incentive was, let's try to make people healthy, or like when
Well,
Facebook first came out, the incentive, what if the incentive with Facebook was, let's try to connect people?
not to, I understand I'm the last person to champion the pharmaceutical companies, but the argument that they would make is that they're using this data to be able to create better drugs and medicines and that will save people's lives.
I think the counter argument is, okay, if you want to use my DNA, I should choose to participate, get compensated for that participation, and willingly lend my DNA to your research.
Well, to that point, when you sign up, that's what I was mentioning before. When you sign up for 23andMe, when you signed up for 23andMe, you had the option of clicking something or whatever, opting in to share your data, and 80% of the customers did opt in to share their data. Um, I think that we, as a culture, and this sort of goes to our whole perception of privacy and what kind of privacy we expect and what we fear, and maybe we don't fear enough.
I think Europeans are more fearful than Americans. I think they've had a history of the last couple hundred years or more where they want to be a little bit more private with their data now. They don't necessarily trust that at some point a bad actor might come along. I think Americans, we are generally trusting or lazy or don't care as much or what could happen.
Right.
We're a little bit more carefree. Maybe that's a better phrase. Because when I talk to business folks in Europe and they look at our regulations and laws around these topics, the comment is, "Are you people crazy?"
Yeah.
I'm being serious.
No, I know.
They look at us and go, "Are you people out of your mind?"
So I guess just to wrap up, I want to leave people with what they can do. It depends. I think it depends to some extent on what state you live in, because why why wouldn't it? Um, but it varies from state to state what you can do about getting your data erased. But I guess, if you're out there and you've done 23andMe, or you know that a family member has done 23andMe, know that this is an option that you can request to have your data deleted. Um, and
Yeah,
that's something.
go to 23andMe's website, log in. The first thing it says to do is download your DNA test first, so you have it.
Mhm.
Download it. There should be a link that says download my raw DNA data. And then submit a request for permanent deletion of your genetic profile. And then check the box to opt out of third-party sharing.
There you go. Thank you for tuning in. And as always, if you have ideas for topics or guests, or if you have any questions about things we've covered in the past, Please send along any questions or suggestions to digitaldilemmas@lenk.media, and we will include them as we move forward. Thank you so much.
All right, Digital Dilemma fans, that wraps up another episode. Thanks for tuning in and navigating our tech world with us.
Please rate us and leave a review. And if you enjoyed it, tune in next time. We'd also love it if you would send us any questions or suggest guests via email. Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next week.
Digital Dilemmas is a Lenk Media original podcast.